Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful fall morning. My name is Becky Fritchie, and I'm going to be your moderator today. Today, our workshop is going to be about roses, and it's being presented by Ann Beinhorn, a Master Gardener of Placer County. As you saw in our opening slides, this workshop is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube site after it's been uploaded. The link to the video and accompanying resources can be accessed from our website, which is pcmg.ucanr.org. If you have any questions during the presentation, just go to the chat menu, and then we will address the questions at the end of the presentation. Anyway, Ann, take it away.
We're going to be talking about roses today, as you know, and we're getting into varieties, cultural care, and we call IPM. I think you might be somewhat familiar with integrated pest management. It's the way we look at pest management through the university. Who we are as Master Gardeners, we're here to give you unbiased, research-based information so that you can problem solve in your own garden with informed decisions. We are very happy the pandemic is starting to be over and we're a little more available to you in person. But in the meantime, we do have the media and special publications. If you've ever seen The Curious Gardener, it's really a fascinating quarterly newsletter that comes out every season. So you can see what's going on in the garden and little issues that might be occurring because of the season. We're also in the Gold Country media at the Auburn Journal once a month, and we do a QA column. And remember, several slides are going to be showing you our telephone number, which is the hotline. And you can call the hotline at any time and leave a message, or if you have somebody in person, then you're going to get your answers right away. So we get back to everyone who calls on the hotline or anyone who comes to our website and actually sends us an email question. We're pretty excited too that we're going to be having a calendar available to you actually today at the fair and at the nurseries. So our yearly calendar is just about to be in your hands if you care. Today at the Auburn Festival is a home fair, and also at workshops and the farmers markets. We're working on 3, maybe even 4 farmers markets where we will have a booth eventually, but right now in Auburn and Roseville, you can visit our farmers markets. We have workshops, so just go to our website. You can find out where these workshops are and the topics that we're going to be speaking about. We have speakers by request, which means you can call our hotline and request to have a Master Gardener come to your facility and discuss any topic of your choice, just about in horticulture or gardening. We have the Mother's Day tour, and we are feeling pretty positive and optimal that by May, we're going to be able to do a tour in person, and that tour is going to be in the Auburn and northern areas of Placer County. We have the garden fair, hopefully. It's going to be next year, and it's going to be the first weekend in April. And you can read more about this. It's a very informative fair, and it's going to be in Roseville at your convenience. Talking about roses, we're going to discuss a little bit of history and something about rose varieties. I think it's kind of a mystery. If you're not familiar with that, you don't know what kind of rose to get and what to expect from it. You know that they're pretty, but it's good to know something about your varieties. Your cultural practices are pretty much the same for almost every rose. And pest control. We're going to just talk about the pests that are the most common. Rosa rugosa is a native to Asia, but also Siberia, and they have been found in Alaska. So somehow they got over to Alaska because they can tolerate very, very cold temperatures. And Rosa rugosa was brought to our farmlands beginning in the east coast of the United States because they were used for not only a barrier, have lots of thorns and things, but very pretty, and they bring pollinators because they have very open flowers. Rosa rugosa has several different varieties. So if you're ever interested in a very tough rose that requires almost no maintenance, but is deciduous, this is the way to go, especially when you're living closer to the coast, because they like stream beds, and just as the California rose. The California rose, it's quite small, but it comes in different colors, starting out with kind of a white yellow, going all the way to magenta and favoring the pink shades. The Rosa California, I've seen it in other valleys in California. It is really very attractive. It gets maybe 3 or 4 feet and sometimes even taller. And it's common in some areas that are under 1,600 feet elevation. And that's saying quite a bit, because if you look at Auburn, it's 1,200 feet. So it can go pretty high, and it can be found in all the way from Southern Oregon, all the way down to Baja California. Rose varieties, remember that you have 2 main categories. You have the garden or the modern roses that we're most familiar with and are so valued for their flowers. And we have own root roses, roses that can grow without grafting. So under the garden roses, the hybrid teas, most common, the ones you see in bouquets and the ones you see in vases, because when they bloom, they have a solitary rose with maybe side buds. Other roses can have a solitary, mostly floribundas, but most of these other roses that are known as modern roses bloom in clusters, or also called sprays, and different sizes. Probably the best for a home garden is the floribunda. If you don't have a lot of space, it's one that gets about 3 feet by 3 feet and blooms and is just as beautiful as the hybrid teas. Hybrid teas are quite stately, and when you plant those, you certainly can put them close together, but 6 feet apart at the same time, making a garden of hybrid teas so they don't run into each other, and so they don't cause any more loss of air circulation. Grandifloras are larger, and climbers can go to 6 to 12 feet, depending on your variety. English roses are just beautiful. I'm going to show you a picture of one. Old garden roses have prospered over the years because they do so well on their own roots. And often the times they don't even have thorns. Landscape roses are other ones that if you want easy care, you don't even have to prune these guys for quite a while, and you don't have to worry about disease because they have so much disease resistance. You should still check, of course, but likely you're going to be able to buy ones that don't have disease. The miniature rose is one that grows on its own root, and it gets about 2 feet tall. On your left is Joy, which is a very valued rose in shows, and that can bloom in singles or it can bloom in sprays. Over on the right side is a miniflora. This is not the best example of one, but minifloras can get quite large and kind of congested, so you have to clean out the inside. But if you like lots of little blossoms all over the plant, the miniflora is a nice way to go. The floribunda is the one that I spoke of before, and this is one in its second bloom. The floribunda here is orange, but it comes in many, many different colors. The hybrid tea on the right also has a huge variety of colors. Nobody really knows the names of all these varieties because there's so many. But you can see on the floribunda, you might have a possibility of a spray, but there are many singles, and on hybrid tea, only singles. Roses can come in tree form, and of course that's not natural. So you take a cane of a similar species, of a Rosa species, and on that you graft whatever your desirable rose is on the top. In this case, Julia Child, which is one of the top roses in the country. And it comes out to such a pretty tree-looking form. So you can elevate without having to do climbers, but if you have a structure on the right, so to speak, you can go ahead and put in climbers and be sure to secure them very well to that structure. These are the flower forms, the hybrid tea form on the left, the flat or single form. So if anybody talks about a single rose, you can have the idea that even though it can bloom in clusters, it's really one or two layers of flat petals, and it can be very pretty. Down the English rose on the bottom, and it comes in kind of a fluffy looking rose, and it can be very beautiful too. Here's an example of the solitary rose and the spray rose. The solitary rose, like in the hybrid tea, forms kind of a cone shape. So if you bought a bouquet of roses, most likely it's going to be in this cone shape because it's the most desirable. Iceberg rose goes way back to 1958. And this is my neighbor's hedge. It's just a bunch of floribundas in iceberg that are close enough together so they can grow and look like a hedge. It's a very hardy rose, very disease tolerant. And because it's done so well over the years, it's still on the top 10 list. Rosa Corbin was the original name. And you'll notice that a lot of these roses came from Europe. Once they came to the US, then they're dubbed a different name. Now it's called iceberg, and it's one of our Arboretum all-star plants. Landscape roses are ungrafted, as I said, and pretty disease resistant, and come basically in three forms. And you're probably seeing the upright and the ground cover, most likely when you go out, and they're grown very much commercially in commercial spots. Here's other Arboretum all-star roses that have proven over the years to be very hardy and so well in our climate, although we go through periods of drought and periods of flooding, which are not so common anymore. We have three roses that go way back to 1800s, 1888 for Mutabilis, which you can find at the Sacramento City Cemetery if it's still thriving there. The Pearl d'Or, which has a French name, so we know it came from France, and the Grus en Aachen, and all three of these could very likely have come with the pioneers. Grus en Aachen is a 1909, a hybrid. It's a floribunda, and this is the one I have in my garden. Roses like to have slightly acidic to neutral soil, so you can do a soil test before you start your first rose just to see if maybe it will do well, and you might have to add a little bit of something, an amendment to change your pH, but it's unlikely because most of the soils around this area are right at neutral. Organic amendments are important for roses, not only to add to drainage, but because they thrive in that nutrition, which is at play with the soil, the microbes in the soil. They need at least 6 hours of exposure in general to the sun. You can go with lower than that if you only have morning sun. Some of the lighter roses do quite well without having to be in the harsh sun during the winter, during the summer. If you do 6 hours, then the rest of the day be in the shade, you're doing just fine. The roses that do the best with full sun are the ones that tend to be darker, but that's not a hard and fast rule. If you're positioning a pot from a pot, you want to take the graft at the soil level. If it's ungrafted, you want it the same level in the pot as you apply it in the ground. You should separate your garden roses for several feet because of the likelihood that disease can spread quickly, and that if you get too much congestion, you might get more problems with pests, and that's insects and diseases. If you have a bare root plant, keep it very moist. Try to plant it as soon as you can. 24 hours is the ideal. And when you dig into the soil, form kind of a cone for it to sit on, but not for it to be any higher than graft at soil level. Add your amendment and work around that. Ongoing cultural practices. Water should be moderate. Moderate is kind of a funny term because it's telling you that they don't want to be too thirsty, but it's not telling you how it's going to be where you are, because if you have more clay, you might be retaining more water for a longer period. If you have more sandy soil, you might get a lot more drainage and need to add a little bit more water, but you're safe if you have drip irrigation all the way around your drip line underneath the plant, right around the crown of the roots. Streamers do quite well. If you're going to do drip irrigation that come out with little streamers, you can bypass the main graft area, because that, if it gets too wet, can form disease. So with streamers, you can spread them out, maybe get a 180-degree streamer that can spread out throughout the rows. Once the rows gets larger, you can put 2 of these in on opposite sides. You can also do tubing. You can do 1/2-inch tubing or 1/4-inch tubing with emitters spaced every 4 to 6 inches. Fertilizing is common with roses. As long as you stay with organic, it's all right if you fertilize throughout the season after the last bloom to encourage the next bloom cycle. With organics, we are safe. They're very slow. We don't like to use chemical fertilizers. Roses don't like salts, and chemical fertilizers are likely to have salts. And they also cause very fast growth, and you're inviting all of the insect pests. But when you prune in winter, and we talked about air circulation a little bit before, be sure that you're allowing those the suggested canes to come up and not get in each other's way. You want to eliminate crossing branches. You want to eliminate the dead or the not very productive canes. If over time you've been disappointed by your rows, pull out those non-productive canes. They're not going to bring you any more roses. And your most generous canes are going to be those that are newer. Get rid of the diseased canes and don't be afraid of pulling them out. I'll show you the beginning and the after effect. So I started those first 2 points because those are really the most important when you're pruning. You want to influence the flowering period. You want to shape the plant, reduce the prickly branch hazard, and do the same thing for one-time bloomers, but they don't have to be done in winter. A one-time bloomer is pruned just after your bloom, and that happens with some of the older climbers. I'm going to show you a picture of how to find the graft, how to find the good wood, etc. But these are things that you're looking for. You can prune from the top down or from the bottom up, depending on what your preference is. You have to use very sharp, clean tools. So in between rose bushes especially, you need to clean off with disinfecting spray or disinfecting wipes. And we all have that in our cupboards, don't we, after this pandemic. We don't want any leaves underneath the roses that are left there, because that will invite pests, especially if you already had pests and didn't know it. I like to remove all of my old mulch and start all over again after I finished my rose pruning. Here's a nice picture of what the standard rose looks like. This graft is a little bit too high. The graft is the swollen area where you have your rootstock. The rootstock gives support to your desirable plant because it is acclimatized to your area, does quite well, kind of guarantees you a nice size plant because it will encourage that kind of growth. This is a problem rose in that this graft has been allowed to send out suckers. Suckers are these, they're rose canes, they're going to be rose canes thick like these, that have just wanted to take over the plant. So if you ever hear of anybody saying, I used to have yellow roses. Now I have red roses. What's happening? They weren't really looking for suckers, and these suckers got bigger and bigger and just took over. The most predominant rose plant down here is going to be Dr. Huey. Your rootstock is mostly Dr. Huey in our area, but their Fortuniana is another one that makes very large roses. Look for your dead branches. Look at the crossing branches. There's lots of examples of that. Look for a cluttered center. The center needs to be all cleaned out. And know where the bud union is, or the grafting area. If you remove 1/3 of the healthy wood, you're doing all right. You're not being too aggressive. If you go down to half the healthy wood, you're going to end up with maybe more canes and maybe more blooms, but the blooms are going to be small. The less you remove, maybe the fewer blooms you will have in the end, but you will also have bigger blooms. So decide what you want. And maybe every few years you just decide to go half and you'd be all right with that, but I wouldn't do it every year. Add new compost and new mulch after cleaning all that debris away. This is just a standard showing you what it looks like when you make a cut. On the left side, if you cut too high, you end up with all this dieback, which then can get infected on the way. You don't want to cut where part of that bud is actually being cut off. You're going to end up with dieback of this whole area down to the next bud. This is good. This is about 1/4 inch, but we're blowing it up here. And this example could be on any branch. It's just showing you how it looks like when you're pruning, maybe at a slight angle if you prefer that, and maybe about a 1/4 inch above. Over here, you can see the new canes, they have red prickles. The old canes tend to be rather striped in gray. They have gray or white prickles, and they're not very productive and they're not very good looking. And you really have to bite the bullet and decide it's about time now, and you can cut these out, and you can be discriminative about them. If they do have new growth on the top and they've been doing okay, and you need to have your balance, you can keep them, but you can be more aggressive, and I'll show you a picture. Here we start with the basic rose, the basic modern rose with leaves all over and kind of going with every which way. Our roses here, because we have such a mild climate, don't always know when they're supposed to go dormant. They just kind of keep going and going. But between January and Valentine's Day, we should be working on teaching it to be in dormancy, getting rid of all this extra crossing growth, and preferring maybe 3 to 6 desirable canes. You try to make kind of a vase shape, make it open in the center. This is not a good picture to show that, but I'll show you another one. Your climbers tend to bloom much better on the laterals. If you leave your climber alone, you may end up just having blooms at the end of all these canes. And from the graft, you're going to have all kinds of long canes that want to go anywhere they want to go. And you really do have to train them. You have to train them horizontally. Once you pull out all the extra canes that haven't been productive or just want to be down here, you end up with just a few desirable canes, put them on a trellis and have them go back and forth, not crashing into each other, but preferring kind of a horizontal shape. Here's a finished product of a tree rose that's been cut down to 6 canes. It has an open center, and it has kind of a vase shape. And that's really what we're all about when we prune our modern roses. We've taken out all the twitchy little growth. Now, maybe this one's an exception, but we want to take out anything that is less than a pencil shape. Here's a lovely landscape rose that really doesn't need much pruning. And this one's been allowed to go a little bit wild, but every couple of years you can think about going in and maybe even heading it. You can just go straight across. Don't use an electric tool. Just use your loppers and get this to be maybe more shaped to a straight edge. Go inside every year and make sure you don't have a lot of dead or diseased wood inside. And you do have the advantage, of course, that you're not going to have much disease in these wonderful landscape roses. This is a hybrid tea, Gemini, which is a very desirable, very valued rose. The American Rose Society has graded all of the roses that are being bred, and this is a very high graded rose. And this is mine, and I have a lot of fun with it. It's just beautiful, kind of different pinks and whites. If you deadhead this, you're going to have a much fuller plant, but you can also be discriminative in keeping the inside of that plant without too many leaves. It could cause disease or congestion. As you see how this rose goes, it's a hybrid tea. It has a single in the middle, or solitary in the middle, but on the side, there might be side buds. When this solitary rose finishes, the side buds might open, and they're not very big, but they're kind of nice to look at. Sometimes they'll actually start to bloom while the middle rose is flourishing. On the top part of your rose, you're going to find 3 leaflet leaves. So maybe you don't see a lot here, but there's a few leaves that are just made out of 3 leaflets. Down here, you have 5 leaflet leaves, and you have many of them as you go down the plant, alternating from side to side. And when you prune or deadhead, you want to go above one of those 5 leaflet leaves and get it down as far as you want, because you're going to be encouraging a new bloom to come on a stem. And it might end up here. And if you leave it alone, it might end up even higher. We're going to go quickly through pest management. This is probably the most familiar with you. You just don't like those black spots. They're just really ugly. You can cut them out. Don't let them be wet. Don't let those roses be near lawn or any kind of area where they're going to get an overspray, because that's what black spot just loves to thrive. You have to pull those out. You might even have to pull out branches, but it's known that a baking soda solution of 4 teaspoons baking soda and 1% narrow range oil in water, you can come up with a very nice solution. Neem oil is extraordinary. I really like neem oil too. You don't want to put it directly on the black spot, because black spot is still going to thrive. So you need to remove the leaves, then go with neem oil, and you have a good chance of eradicating it for a while anyway. Here's rust, which is probably the most pernicious of the fungal diseases that I've seen. And you got to keep pruning these out, but you've got to make sure your tools are very clean. Make sure that you've got good sanitation under that plant, so you don't have falling leaves that are left there to overspore. You have to be careful during pruning time to remove all of that mulch and any plant material. Powdery mildew has a simple solution. It only comes here in the springtime, and it is encouraged by shade. So if you've got powdery mildew on your plant and it's in the shade for too many hours, I would move that plant. But go by in the morning time and spray it off. And actually that might be enough. Or you can try the baking soda solution again. Botrytis blight is not so common in our area, but in the Bay Area. And so those just need to be pruned out, not only the flowers, but the stems that are affected. Crown gall is just a very typically injurious type of bacterial infection. So don't let your plants stay with crown gall. Make sure that those grafts are taken care of and you're not hitting them with anything. Aphids, same solution. Just come by early in the morning and spray those aphids off, and they can't fly back. That's a good way to get rid of them without having to go the next step, which is insecticidal soaps. And then oils, if that's not working, and you have to time your oil, so be careful with it. Hopefully a beetle is only here in the springtime. It's only 1/4 inch, and you can just pick them out and throw them in soapy water. Same thing with fuller rose beetle. And the easy way to find these guys is the jaggedy edges on those leaves. You could try tanglefoot, which is a sticky material that you put on the trunk, and follow directions on the tanglefoot, and they won't have any way of crawling up that. I want to refer you to these resources, and remember that if you go to ipm.ucanr.edu, you will find some generous information on roses and other kinds of plants.
Thank you, Anne. Do we have any questions? If there are any, just send them through the chat function on your on my menus down below. Okay, I'm not seeing anything come through. Okay, well, thank you, Anne. And I want to remind everybody that you're going to find the link to the handouts and to this recorded workshop. It takes a few days to get it loaded on to the pcmg.ucanr.org website. Oh, wait, we do have a question. See, from Kathleen, I need to transplant 4 tree roses to pots. Do you have any advice for her, Anne?
You say they are tree roses?
Yes.
Tree roses will grow as any other rose. So they're going to have a lot of root, and the roots can go pretty deep. You don't want to be cutting much of those roots. You're going to have a pretty generous pot so that you're not going to have a problem with roots being too congested, just like any other potted plant. And I would use the terracotta, the very thick and heavy pots, so that you don't break any pots. Plastic pots can break over time.
Okay. And when is the best time for her to be doing the transplanting?
Fall is a good time, and so is spring.
Okay. Thank you, Anne. Okay, if you go to our website, please look at the upcoming workshops. You'll see links and information to all of our future virtual workshops and the ones that we've recorded. You can also ask a gardening question by clicking on Ask a Master Gardener. And I want to thank everybody for attending. On October 9th, we have another workshop, and it's going to be replacing your lawn. And we do have another question that just came through. Will I need to add soil to my pots every year?
Roses love good soil. You can top dress, so to speak, add compost. There is also a product that is made for the pH of roses. And if you look around in the nurseries, you can find something that's called planting mix, which is meant to go in the ground, but you can add that to your pots as well.
Thank you. All right, everybody, we'll see you October 9th. I'm going to be presenting Replacing Your Lawn, and I hope to see you there. Bye-bye.